This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. The recap is brought to you by Podscribe. You can find out more at podscribe.com. Now, let's get into this week's news. South by Southwest 2027 PanelPicker launches from June 23rd to July 26th, 2026. Lucas Velez, South by Southwest Manager of Account Management, shared the upcoming launch date for South by Southwest's 2027 PanelPicker application process. On Tuesday, June 23rd at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, there will be a live Ask Me Anything session for PanelPicker, as well as a South by Southwest EDU version of an AMA on Thursday, June 25th at 2 p.m. Central Time. South by Southwest and South by EDU will hold office hours through July to answer PanelPicker questions anyone might have. While on the subject of South by, Sounds Profitable can confirm that Podcast Movement Evolutions will return for South by 2027, specifically Monday through Wednesday of the event. AMP Task Force introduces cross-platform alternative to the podcast download. This week, the Alliance for Measurement in Podcasting, or AMP, announced its first unified impression framework for audio and video podcasting. The framework gives advertisers and publishers a common way to compare audio and video podcast inventory while preserving the download metric as a delivery signal. AMP members approved 4 exposure definitions with no dissenting votes. Those 4 are podcast play, which is 30 seconds of content played, audio or video, once per user per session. Podcast audience, which is the number of unique users who had a podcast play. Ad impression, a commercial begins playing for the user. And ad audience, the numbers of users exposed to an ad impression. This new standard is consumption-based rather than delivery-based, and is inherently designed to work for both audio and video, taking into account both listening and viewing on all platforms. It functions as a supplementary layer of measurement rather than a sudden currency replacement, allowing for cross-platform comparison without needing individual platforms to abandon existing frameworks. In addition to exposure definitions, the AMP intends to develop a universal definition for the term podcast. The task force will unveil its full guidance at the Oxford Road CAO Summit on July 23rd, 2026. Strum and Drawn. In this week's Sounds Profitable article, Tom Webster shares his current relationship with AI. In a year, that relationship has evolved from experimental ChatGPT use to running multiple open-source LLMs on a local server in his home. With the continual development of generative AI technology, he recalls the amount of menial jobs he's seen in his lifetime made redundant by tech innovation, like paying folks $1 a page to type up handwritten papers. A quote from the article, quote, "Finally, I think it's important to note that consumer attitudes about AI and things like podcasts may not be where you think, and that line is always moving. We are already acclimated to TikTok videos being narrated by seemingly the same 2 or 3 voices. I do believe in disclosure, however, I think that too will fall away in time, and that won't take very long, because people are just not going to care. But this is the one thing you can and must do. No matter how much or how little you embrace AI, you must care. Claude cannot care, but you can care. You can ensure that the craft is evident and that the hand of the watchmaker is revealed in the workings of the watch, however it is made." End quote. The constant of AI is the person choosing to post the content. Behind every sloppy email and sketchy article full of generative AI tells, there's a person who decided that was good enough to publish. Thought leadership this week. It's been a busy week for the Sounds Profitable Thought Leadership series. I've got 2 articles to share this time. First up, from Monday, the question B2B brands keep asking that downloads can't answer. CoHost and Quill VP of Marketing Allison Osborne has a new article for the Sounds Profitable Thought Leadership series. The world of business-to-business B2B marketing is growing. Podcasting needs to mature with it. Osborne argues that podcast measurement still answers outdated questions about how many. Download stats matter less now that B2B marketers care more about audience makeup, whether the right people are finding the show, and whether listeners are entering the funnel. They get firmographic data and repeat consumer behavior from every other channel they advertise in. Podcasting has to catch up. Then on Wednesday, Sports Social Podcast Network published Voices of the World Cup, arguing that the sound of the 2026 FIFA World Cup is just as likely to come from a podcast as from a sports broadcaster. In the 4 years since the previous World Cup, podcasting has grown into more than a complementary format. It is now a, quote, defining part of how fans experience major sporting events, end quote. According to a new release from BBC Studios and Number 8, a major U.S. hospitality brand saw a 19% overall awareness lift from a World Cup travel podcast campaign developed by BBC Studios, Number 8, Barometer, and Veritonic. As for the rest of the news, SiriusXM has signed a non-exclusive deal that brings several popular video podcasts to Fox's streaming platform Tubi, including Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend and The School of Greatness. CoHost and Quill founder and CEO Fatima Zaidi launches a new project by asking 10 founders one question. In this first edition, she asks, if you could go back to the year you started your company, what is something you'd do differently? Inside Audio Marketing interviews Acast CEO Greg Glenday about an Acast analysis of 170,000 brand mentions across 12,000 podcasts. For example, food podcasts accounted for less than 1% of conversations about food delivery companies, despite receiving around half of food delivery podcast ad spend. And finally, AdExchanger interviewed IAB EVP and General Counsel Michael Hahn on why the IAB filed an amicus brief for Baker v. Seattle Children's Hospital, a case leveraging privacy laws from the 1960s to liken tracking pixels to wiretapping. That was the download brought to you by Sounds Profitable and Podscribe. I know I go through the stories fast, so remember there is a link in your show notes that will take you directly to today's post on soundsprofitable.com, where you can find links to everything I just talked about. You can also subscribe to get the newsletter version sent straight to your inbox every week. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Brian Berletta, Molly DeMillier, and Tom Webster. And special thanks, as always, to you for sticking with me as I brought you all the news you might have missed from this week in the business of podcasting. Robot?
Download complete.